Welcome to Lesson 1.6, Patterns and Relations. In this lesson, we're going to concentrate on graphing relations. You've done graphing in grade 6, so you should be aware of what it requires, the 5 structure marks and the 5 marks for neatness and for your inputting of your data on your graph. We're going to be doing relations, we're going to be creating tables of values, and we're going to be graphing them. So let's start with the first one. It's the word problem, just to give you an idea of what you're going to be running into. Bob is in a hot dog eating contest. He can eat an average of 3 hot dogs every 1 minute. If we assume he can continue eating at that rate, create a table of values showing how many hot dogs he eats, and then create a graph to show this relation. So I'm going to go through this with you and show you what you're actually going to have to put down step by step. The first thing we have to do is we have to create a table of values. Bob is going to be eating hot dogs at the 0 point. When he first starts, he doesn't have any hot dogs eaten. He's at 0. After 1 minute has elapsed, he now has 3. After 2 minutes, he has 6. And you can see what we're doing here is skip counting by 3s. 9, 12, 15, and 18. So if I was marking this table of values, you can see very quickly, don't make a mistake. Now what we have to do is we have to create a table of values. A graph. I have created the graph already because then it's very neat and you can actually see what we're doing. There are things you have to start with when you make your graph. The first thing you have to do is understand that it's a big L and you have to use a ruler. There is no option there. What I've done here is I've got my input on my bottom. This is the minutes. And I've created spaces between my 1 and 2. I don't have a 1.5 on my input, so I can ignore it. But I've gone 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You'll notice that the spaces are all exactly the same distance. The going up here, this is my output. And it's the number of hot dogs that Bob ate. And you can see I've got a 0 here, and it goes 3, 6, 9, 12, 15. I purposely chose 3, 6, 9, 12 because skip counting by 3s matches the output. Now the second thing, or the next thing you have to do, is you've got your labels, you've got your scale, you've got your minutes, you've got your scale. Don't put in the title until the end because you never know how far up your graph is going to go. So leave that till the end. So what are the pieces we need to know? You must have a title. You must have an x-axis label, and this is your input, and it is going across the bottom. You must have a y-axis label. This is the name of what's on the y-axis, and it is your output, and it is always up and down. Now that you've labeled them, the next thing you have to do is put the numbers on. That's called the scales. We have the x-axis scale, and this is actually mostly given to you in your output, in your input on your graph, to your table of values. So the x-axis scale, and that's your input, and that's given. Next is your y-axis scale, and this is going to be determined by you. And you have to consider how many or how high your numbers go, and what you're going to skip count by to actually get to that location or that number. So this is the y-axis scale, and it's your output. Now, as you can see here, I've done the whole thing for you. I tried to do it with a mouse, and it's not very easy to do with a mouse, so you'll have to forgive the scribbles for your data. But you'll see all 5 structure marks are here. I have a title. Leave that until the end. I have what's called my y-axis label. It's how or what I'm getting from my output. You will notice that I have a y-axis scale. That's what my output is. You choose your skip counting number so that it'll reach the highest number in your table and maybe even slightly higher. And you want to try to choose a skip count that's easily found, like go up by 2s or 3s or 4s or 5s or 10s. Okay. Next, down here, we've got your x-axis scale. And that's going up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. We were given that in this case. That was the minutes for our input. And now we have the scale label. That's the minutes. So if you put all of these in place, this is the way it's going to be marked. Title, y-axis label, y-axis scale, x-axis table, x-axis scale. So you just scored the first 5 marks just by getting your graph ready to graph. Now, the next thing you're going to do is put in the numbers you're given. So at 0, 0, Bob hasn't eaten anything. After 1 minute, he has 3 hot dogs. After 2 minutes, he has 6 hot dogs. And now what you do is you put your information in as dots. Do not join them with a line. And if you do things correctly, all of the things that we're going to do in grades 7, 8, 9 will all be linear, which means your pathway is always going to be a straight line. So if you have a straight line, or if you don't have a straight line, or if you have one point that comes out down here somewhere and is far away from the others, then there's a good chance that you have miscalculated that. Go back and double check your math. Okay, next page. Oh, sorry. The bottom part here. Your input is always on the x-axis, and that's this way right here. Your output is always on the y-axis, and that is up and down. All right, so let's take a look at a problem and go through all the steps that you're required to do. On your next page, at the top, I've given you a table of values. I haven't given you the relation, but you're going to need it for your title. So the first thing, let's take a look. It looks pretty easy. From 0 to 0, 1 to 4, 2 to 8, you can see I'm going up by 4 each time. So I know that the first part of my relation is going to be 4n. So 0 times 4, that works. 1 times 4 is 4. 2 times 4 is 8. So I'm not adding or subtracting anything. That is my relation. Okay? So what is the relation for the table of values? That would be 4n. Now you can use any variable you wish. I like using n and x's. Now next thing it says is create a graph of the inputs and outputs for this relation. The first thing I'm going to look at is the inputs. How many do I need across the bottom? I have to have from 1 to 6. So on my bottom of my graph, on the x, you'll see me starting with a 1 and going all the way up to a 6. They are evenly spaced. Next, you'll see the output. The output's got to get to at least 24. So I want to skip count by a number that'll get me to 24. All right, so I'm going to go up by 4s. You see 4, 8, 12. If you look at the way I've labeled it, you may get the impression I'm going up by 4s. I'm labeling by 4s, but each tick that's not labeled is actually up 2. So this is actually 0, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12. Okay? But I'm choosing to make things a little bit neater, only putting in every second one. Now you'll notice I have a typo here. I didn't realize it till everything was all done. This is actually your output. So you can correct that. So our relation is 4 times n. And we have to take this table of values right here. We've got to put those points on this graph. So our first one is 0, 0, right there. The next one is 1, 4. So go over to the 1 and go up till you reach the 4. 2, 8, go over to the 2, go up until you reach the 8. 3 and 12, go over to 3, go up until you reach the 12. 4 and 16, 5 and 20, and 6 and 24. If you did this correctly, you should notice that all of these form, how come my magic pen didn't work? Oh well. You'll notice that they all form a straight line coming out from 0. And if you did it correctly, they should all line up very closely. Do not put a line on them, but it does give you a way of checking whether your math is correct. For example, if you were doing this graphing and you graph this point here, you would notice that everything else lines up, but this one's kind of out of place. So what you can do is put this one recalculate it, find its proper location, and put it in there. This is one of the key reasons that we have to use a pencil. You never, ever graph by pen. I don't want to see it, and I won't correct it. So when you're all said and done here, what am I going to be marking? Here come your check marks. First off, do you have the output, the y-axis label? Do you have the y-axis scale? Do you have the x-axis label? Do you have the x-axis scale? Do you have a title? And do you have all of your graphing done neatly with the ruler and all the points in the proper location? There's a score of 5 points. So this graph would have earned 10 out of 10. All right, let's start one from the very beginning this time. The graphing of the relation, I'm going to give you the relation. It's called 3x plus 1. So you're going to multiply the input by 3 and add 1 in each case. So starting with the table of values, I'm giving you 0 to 6. If you're not given a table of values, you can choose whatever input you want, but my advice is to use 0 to 6 or 0 to 5 because that's the easiest thing to graph, and you can also do the calculations in your head. You can do a graph which has like an input of 117, 118, 119, 120, but then your math becomes a pain and you have to graph it weird. So let's just stick with easy numbers. Okay, 3x plus 1. So I'm going to use the input of 3. Sorry, of 0. So 3 times 0 plus 1. 3 times 0 is 0. 0 plus 1 is 1. So this one, my output is 1. The next one, 3 times 1 plus 1. 3 times 1 is 3, plus 1 is 4. So my output for this is a 4. And let's do one more. 3 times 2 plus 1. So 3 times 2 is 6. 6 plus 1 is 7. Now you should have noticed in each case I'm going up by adding 3 each time, and that makes sense because if you look at my relation, the number I'm multiplying by is the 3. So we're going to skip count up. No, not skip count. We're going to move up by 3s. So 7 plus 3 is 10. And another one, and another one, and another one. So there's my table. Be careful you don't make a mistake in your first couple of calculations. If you make a mistake in these first couple, then what's going to happen is every time you try to add 3 or add 2 or add whatever number, every single one of them is going to be incorrect. Okay, so now that we have the table of values correct, I now have to take and create the relation, or create the graph. Again, I forgot to fix this. Oops, sorry. I hate when I do that. Okay, so there's our first output. That's my label on my y-axis. I'm drinking juice. And here's my y-axis. It's all skip counting by 4s. That's good because I've got to get up above 24, and it's an easy number to work with. I have to get up above 19, sorry. That's an easy number to get to. And now, my inputs are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I've got them labeled down here. I've got my scale label for input of 6. Okay, there, stop coughing. All right, so let's put the numbers in. The first one is 0, 1. So you go to 0 and go up to 1. You'll notice that this actually doesn't have a tick mark beside it. It's actually halfway between the first tick mark and the 0. Because we're skip counting by 2s, this is 2 and 4, and I need 1, so I got to be halfway between 2 and 1. Sorry, between 2 and 0. So again, here's where its location is going to be, right about there. Now, let's take a look at 1. When there's an input of 1, the output is 4, so we'll go to 1 and go up to 4. For 2, the input is 2, the output is 7, so go up to 7. And you'll see already that I'm creating a straight pathway, aren't I? 3 and 10, 4 and 13, 5 and 16, and 6 and 19. Okay, straight path. Nothing's out of the pathway, so I know I probably did all of my calculations correctly. I was going to mark this for myself or for you. Here's how it would work out. Title, scale label, scale, scale label, scale, Everything looks pretty and beautiful. 10 out of 10. So the last part of the lesson deals with being given the graph, and in this you have to find the relation from the points off the graph, and this is why I made you, do all that battleship games in grade 6. I want you to be able to tell me the locations of these dots and be able to record them in a table. So if you take a look, the dots determine your input. This dot here is above the 0. There is a dot there, so I do need to have 0 as an input. This one here is above 2, so that means that's going to go by 2. And you can see that I'm going up by 2, 4, 6, 8 here. There are my inputs. Now, the next thing I have to do is I've got to look very carefully at the graph, and I've got to take and find the coordinate pairs. So the first dot right here, I've got to go to 0 and straight up, and you can see that it's at 14. So my first point is 0, 14. Under the 2, I go up to 12. So this is 2 and 12. For the 4, I go up to 10. For the 6, I go up to 8. And the 8, I go up to 6. And the last one, the 10, I go up to 4. Now, from the graph, I've got all the inputs and outputs, but be very careful. I can't take a look and just see how much the output goes up by, because these are not going up by 1s, they're going up by 2s. So I have to try to figure this out without, with just this information. It becomes very difficult. So what I'm going to do is, if I take a look, I'm going down by 2 here, going down by 2, going down by 2 each time. So I know if I'm going down by 2, if I were to take and have an input of 0, I know that goes to 14. An input of 1 and 2, I want you to see if you can figure out what's in the blanks. And you can pretty well figure it out. It's pretty easy. 14 something 12, this is counting down. So if I have 14, I'm going to go down 1, go down 1, go down 1. I'm going to be subtracting the n. Now the problem is, what do you start with? If you're going to start with 0 and somehow get up to an n. Well, it's pretty straightforward. 14 take away 0 is 14, so there's my relation. 14 take away the input. So 14 take away 0 is 14. 14 take away 1 is 13. 14 take away 2 is 12. Whenever you see this decreasing, you know you're subtracting. And that's what you got to play with. All right. So from this table, what's the relation? 14, subtract the number. Let's try another one. Okay, I'm going to give you a couple of seconds. I want you to finish this one. I'll help you with the output. The outputs are at 0. So the inputs. The inputs are at 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And you can get those right off the x-axis. So let's see if you can find out what the outputs are. So pause the recording and fill out the table. Okay, let's take a look at this. 0 is at 2. You'll notice that this is halfway between 0 and 4. This one's at 8. And then the next one is halfway between 12 and 16, which is 14. And now I can take a look at what I'm going up by, and you'll see I'm adding 6 each time. Okay? Pretty straightforward. So now that I know what the numbers are in the input-output table, I have to find out what the relation is. Well, in this case, I'm skip counting, or going up in this case, by 6 each time. Since I'm going up by 6, that's what I'm multiplying by. 0 times 6 is 0, and I've got to get to a 2. So to get from a 0 to 2, I'm going to add 2. So now this double check. My input was 1. 6 times 1 is 1. 6, that would give me, 6 times 1 is 6, and 6 plus 2 is 8. That one works. Do one last one, check out with 2. 6 times 2 is 12, and 2 is 14, so that one is also correct. So I know that my relation, 6n plus 2, is the relation for the graph right here. Hi. Here's your assignment. Get your textbook, and let's get going.